How do you know how much you are going to spend each year in retirement before you actually retire? For many retirees, this can feel like a tough question to answer without knowing what retirement lifestyle will actually look like. On top of this, your annual spending has some big implications when we talk about the safety of your overall retirement plan. Underestimate spending and all of a sudden, your plan isn't as safe as you first thought. In this video today, I want to walk through 7 simple steps you can use to accurately predict your spending in retirement. Now, if you Google how to find your spending target in retirement, you'll find some standard rules of thumb like the 80% rule. This rule states that you should take your pre-retirement income and multiply it by 80%. The idea behind this is that part of your current income is going towards retirement savings. You don't need to save for retirement when you're actually in retirement. There are also work expenses like extra gas, work clothes, or other items that will also be eliminated when you retire. So 80% is a simple and rough target you will find many advise to use. The problem with this rule of thumb, and really all rules of thumb, is that they prioritize simplicity at the cost of accuracy. Now, it may happen that the 80% rule does fit your situation, but it's more of a broken clock that is right twice a day type of thing. We meet with a lot of retirees here at Safeguard, and in my experience, finding your retirement spending target can't be done with simple rules of thumb. We work with some retirees who actually are spending more in retirement than they did prior to retirement. Pre-retirement, maybe they focus so much on saving and delaying gratification, and now in retirement, they're ready to have that party, traveling all over the world, buying back their time by paying others to do duties around the house that they don't love to do, and more. Other retirees find that their retirement lifestyle is quite simple. They find the most joy in activities that cost next to nothing, like long hikes with their spouse, or maybe spending a ton of time reading. And so in this video, I want to walk through 7 steps that will help you find a more personalized spending goal. Step number 1, we need to have a benchmark for what you are currently spending. Now, I find everyone has a different level of organization on this front. You might already have an in-depth budget or are in the midst of creating one where you batch every transaction into a specific category. For the most accurate picture of your situation, this is no doubt the best way to create that starting baseline. And although tedious, is something I would urge you to do even just once before you retire. Some people hate the idea of a budget, however. Maybe their spending categories change enough from month to month, and maybe it just feels like a really daunting task. Here's a much simpler approach that gives you a reasonable enough baseline, and all you need is your credit card and bank login. Over some period of time, 12 to 36 months, total up all of your monthly credit card statements as well as the total outflows from your bank. Now, your credit card payment is likely an outflow, so make sure you're not double counting this in your general math. But for most families, this should pretty accurately give a spending baseline, as outside of cash transactions, where else would spending transactions come from? You either spend money on your credit or debit card, or you have an ACH transfer going out from your bank. If you're looking for more detail here, you can likely download a breakdown from your credit card as to what percentage of spending happened in specific categories. Anyway, this is going to give you a solid baseline as to what you are currently spending. From here, step number 2 will be to subtract out retirement savings. If you had an outflow of $15,000 into your taxable account over the last year, don't count that as a transaction that will need to continue in retirement. If you contributed $7,000 to a Roth IRA last year, again, don't count that either. You will no longer need to save for retirement when you are in retirement. The 80% rule does have that correct. Step number 3, we need to figure out how much you are going to need to add to your current baseline budget in order to accurately plan for healthcare costs. Depending on your age, this might be a 2-step process. For instance, if you are younger than 65, you are going to need to account for pre-Medicare insurance as well as Medicare costs after a few years into retirement. Let's first talk about Medicare. Understand that Medicare is not free. Medicare Part A is covered based on Medicare taxes that you've already paid up to this point. But both Parts B and Parts D will carry an annual cost, and that cost could potentially increase if your income is too high due to something called IRMA. For simplicity, let's leave out the potential increases due to IRMA, and let's just focus on the basic baseline for now. For each retiree on Medicare, budget approximately $2,200 per year for Part B Medicare costs and about $666 for Part D. So if you're married and both are on Medicare, that would total about $5,775 for Part B and Part D. However, this isn't the only healthcare cost here. There are still gaps in Medicare coverage that will require you to purchase what's called a Medigap policy. However, which policy you choose can have a big impact on your ongoing costs. Like with all insurance, you trade premium costs for out-of-pocket costs. Choose a Medigap policy with a high deductible, and you will likely have low premium costs on a monthly basis. But if you happen to need care, you're going to owe more out-of-pocket than if you purchase a plan that had higher premium costs but lower deductibles. So annualize out this cost and add it to your Part B and Part D budget, and now you have a pretty good idea of what Medicare premiums will cost you. Again, add this to your current baseline. If you are retiring before 65, you need to estimate pre-Medicare insurance costs. For this video, we're just going to focus on Affordable Care Act insurance for our estimations. Now, luckily, healthcare.gov provides an awesome tool that you can use for these exact estimations. Go to the website and click Get Coverage. Scroll down to Browse Plans and Costs. You're then going to have to enter in all relevant information that they prompt you to. And then once you submit, this is going to bring you to a page that gives you just a whole bunch of plan options. If you're working with a healthcare agent and have chosen a plan already that fits your situation, obviously just use those numbers. If you've never looked at ACA, this is not a video where I'm going to talk through how to choose the plan that best fits your situation. So for an initial analysis, we're just going to pick a middle of the road silver plan. And for the sake of simplicity, we're going to use one of the first ones that we can see as a benchmark. Again, at this stage, we are just estimating costs. Eventually, with working with an agent or advisor, they're hopefully going to help you use strategies to lower those Affordable Care Act costs. But for right now, we're just going to look at those benchmark costs. Step number 4 is going to be one of the most difficult to forecast. How do we accurately estimate a good monthly add-on budget to deal with discretionary costs? This spending bucket is often what makes retirement exciting at the end of the day. Things like travel, going out to eat with your partner on an ongoing basis, entertainment, giving to charity, and more are all items that are discretionary in nature. Now, within this process, there's also a pretty good chance that the baseline budget that we found in step number 1 already has some discretionary items baked in. This is where it's helpful to take that more organized approach of building out a categorized budget. So you can look back and identify which categories are discretionary in nature and which are essential spending. Now here's one area where I think it's worth some discussion on how to think about discretionary versus essential spending. Often people will draw a clear dichotomy between these two categories and imply that, again, if push came to shove, you just need to spend the essential expenses in retirement. So categories like entertainment, travel, and more are all considered discretionary. Although this is theoretically true, I think practically it's more accurate to think about each general category being filled with layers of essential spending and layers of discretionary spending. Take something like travel. Many would label this as a fully discretionary category. But let's say you travel for Thanksgiving and Christmas to your kid's place, and maybe it's a short flight away. Yes, it's not objectively essential that you visit family for the holidays, but gosh, it might be subjectively essential to you. After all, what's the point of retiring if you can't spend time with those you love? Now, you might want to spend more on travel beyond this, with a couple more trips per year. That is more discretionary in nature, but the greater point is that in each category, there are going to be flavors of both essential spending and discretionary spending. So first go through your baseline budget and break out into each category what percentage of this is essential and what is discretionary. Again, in defining these, you get to decide what's essential. Objectively speaking, having internet is not essential, but if you were asking me, it would be in my essentials in my personal budget. From here, you and your partner, if applicable, need to sit down and look at the work you've done so far. Does the current budget accurately reflect all of the discretionary spending that you actually want in retirement? If you've been taking 2 trips a year and plan to do the same in retirement, then budget items like this may not adjust greatly. But what if you haven't gone on any trips and want to travel in retirement? In this type of scenario, you expect your discretionary spending to rise, specifically in that category. It's at this point I think it's important to have a direct conversation with your partner and think through what areas of discretionary spending are most meaningful to you. In a capitalistic consumerist society, it's easy to get caught up in all the different areas that you can spend money. A nice home, nice clothes, nice vehicles, a lot of travel, and more are all nice things to have, but you probably don't have a limitless budget. So rather than looking at all the endless things that you can spend money on, I think it's important to identify a few key areas referred to as money dials. These are areas or categories that give you the most joy in spending. And the categories for you and your spouse might be totally different. That's all right. But as you think through your previous spending, what areas gave you the most joy? What areas have you seen the biggest happiness ROI? I think it's best when thinking about discretionary spending to cut in areas that don't bring you that massive joy and instead maximize areas that do bring you that happiness, satisfaction, and fulfillment. Don't really value nice clothes, but you do value travel? Well, don't just aimlessly increase your clothes budget by 50% to try to account for discretionary spending. Keep that budget category the same, but then focus on the added cost increase for travel. This thinking brings us to step number 5. In planning for retirement, I don't think you should view an income goal in a very binary pass-fail type of manner. Retirement spending is a contextual situation. If you're doing retirement planning properly, there's inherent conservatism that you have to apply into this process. If you're looking at a 30-year retirement, a lot can happen. In the worst case situations historically, maybe your current savings could only support $7,000 spending per month. But maybe in the best case scenarios, you could spend $15,000 per month. We don't know which scenario you ultimately will experience. And because of this, it's worth having multiple targets. For instance, as you thought through your subjective essential spending in the previous step, total up what that budget looks like and you have a minimum target. This is a target that you want to make sure you can hit with high certainty before you even begin retirement. Then if we bounce back to the other extreme, whether you've thought through it or not, most people have an upper limit for what they can effectively spend. Now, don't get me wrong. If I gave you $1 million per year and I forced you to spend it, I'm sure you could figure out ways to spend it. But I doubt all of that spending would be what I'll call effective spending. There would be areas where you're spending just because someone told you had to spend $1 million. So as you think through your discretionary spending, what would be your dream budget? Where, sure, you might be able to theoretically spend more if you were forced to, but the utility of spending drops greatly. I think this is also an important extreme to know, because if you're lucky enough to be in a situation where you can spend this safely, it has big implications on how you build out the rest of your retirement plan. You can focus more on peace of mind rather than endless continual growth. Then the goal budget, or the kind of the median budget, if that's what you want to call it, is pretty self-explanatory. This is the number that we've been trying to form up to this point. But again, I think this step is crucial because you might find that you can't quite spend your goal budget right now. Maybe you're 5% off of your goal budget, but you're 35% above your minimum budget. Well, now we need to have a discussion if it's worth working X more years for that extra 5% of spending, or if you're close enough to pull the trigger. Binary thinking would leave you with a keep working directive, but that's not necessarily best for your overall goals. Step number 6, now that we have your budgets laid out, we need to factor in taxes. Again, this will be an area you probably need to run 2 scenarios, before and after Social Security, because Social Security will meaningfully change your overall taxation. You will also need some kind of tax tool to help you in this process. TurboTax or other softwares may provide you with this type of tool. Here's what you are going to do. Look at your overall asset mix between your accounts. I have a hypothetical mix on the screen right now. This will not be the best withdrawal strategy, but it's going to give us a good benchmark to find our tax implications. I want you to take your goal income that you've generated thus far and assume you're going to withdraw pro rata from your assets. So if you need $10,000 per month and 65% of your assets are tax deferred assets, assume that you are taking $6,500 per month from those traditional IRAs. Continue with this process with the rest of your accounts and upload them into this tax analyzer, and you can gain an estimate of that tax liability given this withdrawal method. So $78,000 would come from IRAs, $35,000 would come from your taxable account, which is going to generate some kind of capital gains depending on how your taxable account currently is mixed between cost basis and unrealized gains. So take whatever those taxes are going to be on this $120,000 hypothetical example, add that to that $120,000, and now you have a pre-tax target as a baseline. Again, run the same type of analysis for once you're on Social Security as well, and you'll likely see your overall tax situation change. If you're working with an advisor, don't worry about this. They should be doing this for you, but this is a solid DIY approach. From here, we get to step number 7. Now, if you've watched some of our videos before, you heard me talk about the retirement spending smile. This is an idea that retirement spending doesn't stay static in retirement, simply increasing by inflation each and every year. Instead, in real terms, spending tends to drop as you age. This makes sense if we think about it, as your ability to enjoy your discretionary budget, things like travel, drops as you are able to do less. So as you project out your budget into the future, don't just increase spending each year by a base inflation rate like 3%. Data shows that for a married couple, real spending tends to drop by 2.4% per year and about 1.7% for a single retiree. So to accurately reflect spending adjustments, if you were assuming a 3% inflation rate, a married couple would only adjust their spending by 0.6% as they project out their future spending. Again, this will give you a more accurate but general guideline in showing how your spending changes in the future. Now, as you go through these 7 steps, did this give you a number quite a bit different than the standard 80% rule? I bet for many of you it did. If there were items that you think should have been added into this process, let me know in the comments down below. And if you're someone who is having trouble nailing down the discretionary spending portion of your budget, I think I have a video that might help. Here are 5 categories of spending that I think every retiree should aggressively spend on. Thanks for watching this video, and always remember, you don't need more money, you need a better plan. Look forward to seeing you in the next video.